I never imagined that the day a father fears most isn't when his child leaves home, but when the child returns, wearing a smile cold enough to freeze every instinct in your body. Christmas Day 2023. I was 68, and in that moment, sitting at the dinner table of the home my wife Lauren and I built over 3 long decades, my son Michael raised his wine glass, smiled like a proud host, and asked Dad, "Do you like the $5,000 Mary sends you every month?" The entire room froze. I stared at the twinkling Christmas lights instead of at my son, because if I met his eyes, he might have seen my hands trembling under the table. My fingers tightened around the chair, not out of anger, but because I knew that was the moment the truth began to show its face. For 6 months, not a single dollar had come in. Not $5,000, not $500, not even $5. But Michael smiled, and Mary, my daughter-in-law, tilted her head, eyes soft in a way that felt rehearsed, her voice thick with syrup. "We just want you to live comfortably, Dad." They didn't know that earlier that morning I had received a letter from the bank saying my balance wasn't enough to cover my home insurance. They didn't know Lauren had been gone for 9 years and that I still kept my promise to her. Never rely on our child for money. And they certainly didn't know that for the first time ever, Mary's smile didn't look like a smile. It looked like a mask. Before we keep going, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We share real stories every day. Stories about justice, dignity, and the truths families try to hide. Tap like, and tell me where you're watching from. My name is George Whitman, former Portland firefighter, 68 years old, widower since 2014. For a long time, I thought losing Lauren was the worst pain a man could carry. I was wrong. The real pain is when the person you raised, protected, and loved for a lifetime looks at you not as a father, but as a burden. Or worse, as an account to manage. Michael and Mary arrived that afternoon when the Portland cold was sharp enough to leave frost on the door handles. I stood on the porch and watched their SUV stop on the driveway Lauren used to sweep clean every autumn. Michael hugged me quick, polite. Mary hugged me too, but her embrace lacked warmth. It felt like something she learned from a book rather than something she meant. She handed me a Christmas gift. I unwrapped the red paper, the color of holiday ribbons, roasted ham, and blood. Inside was a thick, glossy book, The Best Oregon Nursing Homes, 2024 edition. I looked up at her. She tilted her head and said, "You're getting older, Dad. We just want you somewhere, safer than being alone." Her smile never reached her eyes. Dinner was served in the warm wooden kitchen where Lauren had cooked hundreds of meals for me and Michael. The room smelled of cinnamon butter and red wine warming on the stove, but none of it warmed me. Michael talked about big deals at Solar Corps. Mary talked about family financial planning, and I just listened, smiling when appropriate, nodding when required. Until Michael set his wine glass down. The Christmas lights reflected off the glass like the edge of a thin blade. "Dad, do you like the $5,000 Mary sends you every month?" I looked at my son, the boy I once taught how to hold a fire hose in the backyard, the boy I carried on my shoulders through rainstorms, the boy Lauren once called our pride. Now he was smiling at me like he had just given me the world. I wanted to ask, "Why do you think your father needs $5,000 from Mary?" But the words jammed in my throat. Mary watched me closely like a teacher waiting to grade a student's reaction. When dinner ended, they left. The engine hummed. The taillights disappeared into the cold December night. Silence returned to the house. No laughter. Just the ticking of the clock, like my own heart counting the seconds. I went into my study, opened my laptop, logged into my bank account. I had seen many terrible things as a firefighter: collapsed homes, pleas for help, nights without sleep. But I had never seen anything colder than this screen. There were no $5,000 deposits, no support payments, nothing, just emptiness. Like the chair beside me where Lauren used to sit. I leaned back and forced myself to breathe. Not because I was poor, but because being lied to right to your face by your own child. That kind of cold sits in your bones. I shut the laptop, stood up, poured myself a glass of water. On my way back to the porch, Mrs. Monroe, my neighbor, walked by. She said, "Your daughter-in-law's asked me a few times already. She said she's worried you keep forgetting to lock your doors at night. Are you sure you're all right, George?" I froze. Mary said that to the neighbors about my memory. A thin layer of fog drifted across the porch. The air was cold, but my chest felt colder. I went back inside, opened her Christmas gift. The nursing home guidebook lay there, thick, heavy, full of implications. It stared at me like a warning, about intrusion, about control, about a plan forming quietly in the dark, one I hadn't seen yet. Christmas night. I sat alone in the living room. The lights on the tree blinked softly, reflecting on the glossy pages of the nursing home guide. And in that moment, loneliness turned into something sharper, suspicion, cold, precise, breathing quietly in the dark. I didn't know then that this night would become the first crack in my family. And just like the old houses I had once seen burn from the inside, a tiny crack was all it took. Christmas 2023. That was the night the first flame was lit. February 2024. If there's one thing I learned after more than 30 years as a firefighter, it's this. The biggest fires always start with the smallest signs. A faint burning smell, a flicker of light where none should be, a strange silence inside familiar walls. Right after that Christmas night, a flicker like that began dancing in the back of my mind. I didn't know what it was, only that it was growing, and it started with numbers. It was a wet January morning in Portland. The sky looked like a gray blanket thrown over the world. I put on my heavy coat and walked into the First National Bank on Stark Street, a place I had visited for 20 years, yet somehow that day it felt colder than the rain outside. I waited my turn. The LED screen blinked 42. Sandra, I stepped forward. Sandra Nguyen, a young Vietnamese-American banker, looked up with a polite smile. "How can I help you today, Mr. Whitman?" Her voice was gentle. Not the kind of voice you expect to shatter a man's world. But I was wrong. I handed her a printed statement and asked, "Can you check something for me?" "A $5,000 deposit? Monthly. From last June until now. I can't find it anywhere." She typed a few keys. The glow from the screen lit her face, a cold, pale light, thin as a blade. "Mr. Whitman." She hesitated. "There are no $5,000 deposits, not a single one." I pressed my lips together. I had expected that answer, but it still cut straight through me like glass. Sandra kept typing. On the screen I saw our reflections, a young woman and an older man, and between those reflections the wide, quiet space where a generation can be taken advantage of. "But," she said softly, leaning closer, "there is something unusual." I looked at her. "There's a secondary account under your name. George Whitman Holdings. Opened in June." I spoke immediately. "I didn't open that account." Sandra glanced at me not with suspicion, but with the uneasy knowledge that she was about to say something a person should never have to hear. In the file, she rotated the monitor slightly. "There's an internal note." A short line glowed on the screen. "Client may have memory issues. Confirm changes with caregiver Mary Whitman." The blue light from the screen washed over my face, cold enough to sting. I stared at those words for a long moment. Memory issues. My voice sounded cracked, like someone squeezing my throat. Sandra shook her head quickly. "I didn't write that, sir. It was added in a previous request from someone connected to the account. But this note means the bank prioritizes confirming changes with the listed caregiver." I heard every word. each one falling like ashes from a burned house. Caregiver. Who was my caregiver? Why was Mary, the woman I saw only a few times a year, listed as someone who legally cared for me? Why would anyone claim I had memory issues? I left the bank. Outside it had started raining again. Portland rain is different. It seeps into your coat, your bones, your thoughts. I drove home. The truck rattled as I passed the old pine trees lining the road. When I turned into my driveway, I froze. Lauren's old pickup, the one she loved so much she refused to let anyone else touch, was gone from the garage. The garage door was open a few inches, just enough to show absence. I stood there listening to the rain hit the roof tiles. Then I called Michael. "Where's your mother's truck?" Michael's voice was casual, almost cheerful. "Oh, Mary handled that for you. She said you didn't need that old thing anymore. Sold it or had it moved somewhere. Don't worry about it, Dad. Don't worry." That phrase burned hotter than any fire I had fought. I hung up. Don't worry, I had already lost my wife 9 years earlier. Now the one thing that still smelled like her truck had been taken from me without a call, without a question, without the smallest measure of respect. That night I went into my study. I opened the drawer and pulled out an old notebook, the one Lauren used to call my second brain. I opened to the first blank page. I wrote January 12, 2024. No $5,000 deposits. January 12th, secondary account opened without my consent. Mary listed as caregiver. Lauren's truck missing. Michael said Mary handled it. I paused. The wind slipped through the tiny gap in the window frame. Winter wind in Portland always carries a scent like a warning trying to find a place to land. I wrote again. Someone is rearranging my life. Quietly. I turned the page. For the first time, I feel I must protect myself. From my own family. The next day I visited Mrs. Monroe, my neighbor of decades. She was watering her lavender bushes. She looked up. "George." "Everything all right?" I asked her directly. "Did Mary say anything to you?" Mrs. Monroe set down her watering can. "Well, yes. She asked if you forget to lock your door at night. And if you're, struggling with memory lately." Memory struggling. I didn't answer. I just nodded and walked home. But my chest didn't settle. Through all of February, I kept writing. Who called me? Who visited? How much I spent? What disappeared? What the neighbors said? Every night the pages grew thicker, and every night the feeling inside me grew sharper. Not fear, not anger, but vigilance, the same instinct I had when entering burning buildings, knowing one wrong move could bring the whole place down. And slowly I began to understand this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't the kids trying to help. Someone was quietly rearranging my life one piece at a time. On the last night of February, I sat by the window watching snow dust the empty driveway covering the faint tire marks from Michael's last visit. I opened my notebook. I read every line I had written in 2 months. No $5,000 secondary account. Mary as caregiver. Lauren's truck gone. Neighbors asked about my memory. Patterns forming. Not coincidence. I closed the notebook. The cover felt solid, like the last fire extinguisher I ever held familiar, heavy and capable of saving a life. And I finally understood. This was no longer suspicion. This was truth. From that night on, I didn't merely suspect Mary. I watched. I documented. I prepared. And I fought back the only way an old firefighter knows how. With silence, with observation, and with dignity. The fire had begun, and I would be the one to put it out. March 2024. Some fires start with a spark, a small flicker almost too faint to notice. And then there are fires that are lit by human hands. By March 2024, I began to understand that what was burning through my life wasn't fate or bad luck or old age catching up with me. It was a plan, a deliberate design, laid out step by step like an arsonist pouring gasoline around a house waiting for the right moment to strike the match. And the next spark came from Texas. After the incident at the bank in February, I barely slept for 3 straight weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that line, "Client may have memory issues. Confirm changes with caregiver Mary." It felt like someone was rewriting my life behind my back. Every night I heard the old front door shake against the winter wind, and for the first time in my life I felt unsafe inside my own home. But the thought I couldn't shake was something my son said on Christmas. "Dad, do you like the $5,000 Mary sends you every month?" There were 2 possibilities. 1, Michael was lying. 2, someone made Michael believe it was true. And the second possibility was far more dangerous. To learn the truth, I needed information from SolarCorps, the only place that could tell me what was really happening. So I wrote to the one man I knew I could trust, a man who owed me his life. Frank Davis, chief accountant at SolarCorps. In 1994, I dragged Frank out of a burning apartment. He was 19, choking on smoke, ready to give up. I still remember what I told him: "I'm here. Don't quit on me." 30 years later, it turned out I was the one who needed saving. I sent the email at 11:42 p.m. 5 minutes later, I got a reply. "George, I thought you already knew. SolarCorps has been depositing $4,800 a month into your secondary account since June." I read it over and over. My hand grew so cold I could barely feel the pencil I'd been holding. "A secondary account." "Another one," I replied instantly. "Frank, I don't have a secondary account. I haven't opened any new accounts since 2019. This time it took him 3 minutes. But those 3 minutes felt like listening to floorboards crack beneath your feet in a burning house. Frank's next email was worse. "George, the internal file says the account was created by Mary Whitman. They used a scanned copy of your driver's license. You really didn't know." Didn't know. I wanted to laugh, bitterly. I'd lived long enough to recognize my own signature, and long enough to know when someone was crafting a story around me. I stood up. In the quiet of my house, the ticking of the wall clock echoed through the room, each tick like footsteps approaching. Not Mary's footsteps. Truth's. 2 days later, I packed a suitcase, locked my front door, climbed into my truck, and began driving south. A 2,000-mile journey to Austin, Texas. No warning, no calls, no messages to Michael or Mary. I just drove. Oregon into California, California into Nevada, Nevada into Arizona, Arizona into New Mexico, New Mexico into Texas. I slept in the truck, ate at gas stations, sat with nothing but highway noise and my own thoughts. Sometimes I thought about Lauren. She used to love long road trips, her hand resting by the window softly singing Fleetwood Mac songs. Now it was just me. And a colder companion than the desert night, the realization that the betrayal wasn't an accident, it was happening in my own family. After 27 hours straight on the road, I stopped in El Paso for a few hours of sleep. But I didn't rest. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw fragments. The Christmas gift, a nursing home guidebook. The note, memory issues, Lauren's truck disappearing. Don't worry, Dad. Mary lying without blinking. When the sun rose, I got back on the road and headed toward Austin. When I arrived in the city, I didn't go to Michael's house. I drove straight to SolarCorps headquarters. The building looked clean, modern glass panels reflecting a perfect Texas sky, not a cloud in sight. But inside me, a storm had already formed. Frank met me at a cafe in the lobby. His hair had gone grayer since I last saw him. "George." He studied my face, then whispered, "Did you really not know? What should I know, Frank?" He lowered his voice, looked around carefully. "There's something off about Mary." I let him speak. "Last month I saw her standing outside the finance conference room, eavesdropping and taking notes on her phone. She has no reason to be there. She's not part of accounting. I didn't interrupt. Then she went to HR asking about Michael's family bonus account. She asked if bonuses could be rerouted. She asked about family financial authorization. She asked questions she had no business asking. Frank swallowed hard. George, I think she's trying to control Michael's finances. And maybe yours. I stayed silent. Frank finished with a sentence that felt like a steel wire tightening around my ribs. Solar Core deposits the money, but the only person receiving it is Mary. Sitting there in that bright Austin cafe, I felt like I was deep in some basement bunker. No light, no air. After the meeting, I drove to the bank branch Frank had mentioned. I parked 10 yards from the door. And as I reached for the handle, the glass doors opened. Mary stepped out, holding a thick envelope and a bulging stack of documents. She stopped for a moment, pulled her mask down, and fixed her hair in the reflection of the glass. I remained perfectly still in my truck, watching her the same way a firefighter watches the person who just lit the match. She walked quickly to her white sedan. Her phone rang. She answered with that same sweet voice she used on Christmas. I just finished meeting a client. I'm heading back now. A client. At a bank, with that many documents, I watched until her car disappeared. I didn't need any more proof. Not a single word more. I had seen enough. That night I checked into a cheap motel near Highway 71. Yellowed walls, peeling wallpaper, the smell of bleach so strong it stung the eyes. I dropped my bag onto the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. I opened my notebook. I wrote, Mary left the Austin bank with a stack of documents. She lied to Michael. She set up the secondary account using my ID. She approached Solar Core HR. She eavesdropped on finance meetings. She tried to control Michael's bonus. Put together, this is not random. I set the pencil down, stared into the dim motel room, and for the first time I understood something clearly. Mary wasn't just greedy. She wasn't impulsive. She wasn't careless. She was strategic. She had a plan. A long, calculated plan. And I was just one obstacle. The real target was Michael, and anyone standing between her and that target would be removed. Even me. The Texas night was hot and suffocating. I stepped onto the small balcony overlooking the empty parking lot. Images kept replaying in my head. Nursing home book memory issues. Lauren's truck gone. Mary leaving the bank. Michael believing I got monthly payments. HR bonuses, finances, secondary account, 4590, my stolen driver's license scan. Pieces on a table, pieces forming a picture. Not a concerned daughter-in-law, not a responsible financial advisor, but a woman building a takeover, piece by piece. With sweet words, fake concern, and forged paperwork. I lit a cigarette, something I had quit years ago. The flame burst in the darkness. The tip glowed red, and one cold, precise thought ran through my mind. Mary isn't counting my money. She's counting my years. I pressed the cigarette out, not in the ashtray, but with my fingers. I needed to feel the pain, to know I was still alive, to know I still had fight in me, and to know with absolute clarity this war had officially begun. April 2024, Portland, Oregon. There are moments in a man's life when he feels he has touched the bottom of the dark. But then, fate places something small into his hands, so small it seems insignificant, and that very thing becomes the spark that makes him rise again. For me, that spark was a letter. I returned from Texas on a day when Portland's rain fell like sheets of glass. Each drop struck the windshield with the rhythm of someone knocking, urging, "Look again, George." Nothing is the same anymore. My house appeared in front of me, silent, cold, hollow. A shell of the place that once had a soul. I stepped inside and felt it immediately. Something was wrong. Not the furniture. Everything was exactly where I left it. Not the smell, just damp wood and stale air. The wrongness was a feeling, a presence. The unmistakable sense that someone had been inside this house while I was gone, walking across the floors, opening drawers, touching the things that belonged to Lauren, touching the things that belonged to me. Mary had been here, and I knew that not just with logic, but with the instinct of a man who has walked into hundreds of fire scenes. The house carried the scent not of a stranger, but of someone far too familiar. I walked into Lauren's old bedroom. Gray Portland light filtered through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. I opened the wooden cabinet where she kept her most important papers, and I saw it immediately. The small wooden box, the one Lauren used for her most private belongings, had been shifted. Not by much, but to a man who notices millimeters in burning buildings 2 centimeters, was enough to know someone's hand had moved it. I opened the box. Papers disturbed. Envelopes shoved in the wrong direction. Documents about the house insurance, financial accounts, all riffled through. And at the bottom of the box, I found an old photo album. Inside it, tucked between the pages, was an envelope. Half pulled out as if someone had begun to open it but stopped or was interrupted. My name was written on the envelope in the round, steady handwriting I could recognize even with my eyes closed. George, if the day ever comes. I stopped breathing. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. The paper yellowed by time, but the handwriting sharp, alive. Lauren wrote George, "If you're reading this, you're either in trouble or someone is trying to touch what belongs to you. You are a good man. So good that sometimes you can be taken advantage of. That's why I'm writing this. You spent your life saving others from fire. But not all fires come from wood and gasoline. Some fires come from greed. If someone ever tries to control your life, keep the one thing no one has the right to take your honor. Keep your honor, George. Not the money. Money can be earned again. Honor cannot. And if you must fight, fight the way you fought in that 1994 fire when you saved Frank Davis. You didn't know it then, but that day you saved my heart too." When I finished reading, I placed the letter on my knee. My hands were shaking not from age, but from something deeper. For years I had lived like a retired firefighter, quiet, careful, expecting nothing, wanting nothing. But what Mary had done, and what this letter said, pulled me back to the man I used to be. A man who refused to stand still while someone tried to burn down his home, whoever was holding the match. That evening I drove to the small church where Pastor Lee preached. The church hadn't changed, old shingles, stained glass windows glowing from the inside, light breaking through in soft colors. Pastor Lee was cleaning up hymn books when he saw me. "George, in this rain, what's wrong?" I handed him the letter. He read it slowly. When he finished, he placed a hand on my shoulder. Lauren always knew more than she ever said. "I know," I replied. His voice deepened. "George, your silence these past months wasn't strength. It was the trap that made others think you were weak." "I understand," I said quietly. "Honor doesn't die," he said, "but too much silence can make it fade." I looked at the wooden cross hanging above the altar. The candlelight cast its shadow long across the floor, a crack in the darkness. "I won't be silent anymore," I said. Pastor Lee smiled, not a joyful smile, not a sad one, the smile of a man witnessing a soul return to itself. After leaving the church, I drove to the home of the one person I knew I needed next. Evelyn Carter, a retired attorney, Lauren's closest friend for almost 30 years. A woman you'd never want on the opposing side in court, sharp, direct, able to see through lies the way others see through clear glass. When she opened the door, she said, "Only, I've been expecting you since I read your email." I handed her everything I had collected: bank statements, the secondary account, the memory issues, note Frank's information, photos of Mary leaving the Austin bank, my timeline of events, every detail from the past 2 months. Evelyn laid everything out on the table. The yellow lamp behind her cast a cold steel glint in her eyes. Conclusion: I asked. Without looking up, she spoke with the weight of a gavel. George, you are the victim of elder financial abuse. The words hit like a collapsing beam. She continued, Mary is following the standard pattern. I've seen this before. She pointed at each item. 1. Undermine your medical credibility. Add memory issues. 2. Insert herself as your caregiver to legitimize financial control. 3. Open secondary accounts. Redirect funds. 4. Remove physical assets tied to your identity like Lauren's truck. 5. Build a case that you are losing capacity so she can eventually obtain broader legal authority. Then Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out a form. She placed it on the table. A medical power of attorney. Unsigned. Unfiled. The authorized agent, Mary Whitman. The room felt colder. I found it in an incomplete HR file from Solar Core, Evelyn said. She downloaded it. Filled it out. Just needed your signature and notarization. If I had gotten sick, if Mary had brought this to me with tears and concern, if I had signed without reading, anything could have happened. Good thing she didn't get to finish it, Evelyn said. We sat in silence. My life, my autonomy had been opened like a book and rewritten without my knowledge. Finally, Evelyn pushed a stack of papers toward me. Elder Abuse Office. This is your filing. I looked at the paperwork. White pages, heavy as a collapsed house. She spoke softly but firmly. George, it's time for you to fight. Not for the money, but for your honor. I picked up the pen. Black ink. My hand trembled, but the line it drew was straight. I signed my name. Each stroke felt like drawing a line of fire between me and Mary, a line I would never step back from. When Evelyn left with the documents, Portland rain poured hard against the roof. The sound reminded me of all the fires I had fought, the hiss of water striking flame, the sound of salvation. I stood alone in the living room holding Lauren's letter again. I read the last line. If someone touches what is yours, keep your honor. I nodded. Not to Evelyn. Not to Pastor Lee. To Lauren. I promise. I placed the letter into the drawer and closed it gently. In that moment, I was no longer a lonely 68-year-old widower trying to weather the storm. I became the man I once had been, the one who ran into the collapsing apartment in 1994 and pulled a dying boy back into the world. A man who knew when to stand still and when to step forward. That night I stepped into the fight, not for revenge, but to reclaim the honor Mary thought I had lost. There are fires that died long ago, yet their embers stay buried beneath the soil of our memories, waiting for someone to step on them and ignite all over again. In May of 2024, I felt myself walking across those embers. Not the fire of a burning building, but the fire of betrayal, deceit, and ambition. The kind of fire that burns quietly, and far more dangerously than anything I ever faced in uniform. And this time, I wasn't meant to put it out. I was meant to use it. The day Bill showed up on my porch, Portland was wrapped in its usual thin drizzle, soft gray, bone deep. Bill Carter. My old firefighting partner. We once carried each other through collapsing hallways, shared the last breaths of an oxygen tank, and stood shoulder to shoulder in flames that could have killed us. We were brothers once. Now he stood under a torn umbrella with a face carved by years no one checked in on, and eyes that looked like they had watched too many quiet tragedies unfold. George, Bill spoke slowly. You holding up, I opened the door wide and let him in. Made coffee. Sat with him at the old wooden table. He took one sip and got straight to the point, the way only men who have survived fire tend to speak. I heard about Mary. I didn't ask from where. Bad news moves fast in the veteran community. But Bill didn't say it with gossip in his voice. He said it with experience. George, he set his cup down. My son once stole my house from me. I looked at him silent. Bill stared down at the table as if searching for a scorch mark no one else could see. He got my signature when I was laid up with back pain. Said it was insurance adjustment paperwork. A dry, hollow laugh escaped him. Turned out it was a real estate transfer authorization. He swallowed hard. One signature won. George and I lost everything. I didn't look away. He met my eyes again. Silence is how they decide you're weak. I stayed silent. And I paid for it. Then he leaned forward. Don't stay silent, George. Don't be me. His words hit me like a shovel striking buried embers, and I felt the heat begin to rise. A few days later, Evelyn came to my house. Not with her usual composed, lawyerly calm, but with tension across her face like a wire pulled too tight. I need you to start collecting everything, she said, walking in without waiting for permission. From now on, every piece of paper, every email, every change matters. We sat at the table. She slid a long list toward me. 12 months of bank statements, official signature exemplars for the house insurance and taxes, online banking login history, declined transactions, photographs of suspicious mail, records of calls from banks, Solar Corps and government offices. I asked, "What's the reason?" Evelyn met my eyes, hers sharp and cold as a thin blade. "Mary is building a narrative. You need to build the real one." She opened her laptop, pulled up an email from Frank Davis. Solar Corps corporate card. Unauthorized spending $22,000 in personal charges. Travel. Spa. Confidential document courier. 2 legal retainer consultations. My throat tightened. "You're sure?" I asked. Evelyn nodded. "Every invoice has Mary's digital signature." I braced myself against the table, my gaze falling to the floor. $22,000, I whispered. "She's not just targeting me, she's targeting Michael's company." Evelyn folded her arms. "People like Mary never target just one person, George. They target systems. You, Michael, corporate accounts. Each one is just a rung on a ladder." That night, while organizing the mountain of papers, I found something that chilled me more than any winter in Portland. A receipt buried in the kitchen trash bag I had pulled from the bin. Confidential document courier. Overnight delivery. Not mine. I hadn't ordered anything. I turned the page. In the upper right corner, sender Mary Whitman. My pulse tightened. I dug further and found a small sticky note in her handwriting. "Check if he drives at night. Unsafe. Report to DMV." No name. No George. But who else in this house would she be talking about? The strategy was clear. If Mary could convince the DMV I was unsafe behind the wheel, they could restrict or revoke my license. And if I couldn't drive, I'd be isolated, dependent on her, the very caregiver the bank now recognized. I pressed my hand against the back of the chair, trying to steady myself. The embers under my feet weren't just glowing anymore. They were spreading. After days of collecting evidence, Evelyn and I sat in my small office, turning the room into a war room. She laid out the documents like battle plans. She wasn't Lauren's old friend now. She wasn't a retired attorney. She was a general. "Look here," she said, pointing one. "The secondary account was not opened by you." 2. The memory issues note soft framing of diminished capacity. 3. Mary's prepared but unsubmitted medical power of attorney. 4. Corporate financial misconduct. 5. The DMV reporting intent. 6. Intrusion into family financial files. 7. Removal of Lauren's truck without permission. 8. The lie of the $5,000 monthly support. Evelyn inhaled. This is no longer suspicion. This is a pattern. A full elder financial abuse pattern. I looked down at the papers. They weren't paper. They were burn marks. Every single one a scar Mary had carved into my life. I asked, "What's the next step?" Evelyn stood straight. "We need a strike. Something small enough not to alarm her, but strong enough to draw every eye to her when the time comes." She paused, watching my face. Do you have any ideas, George? I closed my eyes, saw Lauren, saw her standing under the church awning during veteran fundraisers, believing that kindness, true kindness, could illuminate darkness better than any spotlight. When I opened my eyes, I said, I have an idea. A kind gesture, but the perfect trap. I told Evelyn I want to host a veterans fundraiser dinner. Invite Michael and Mary. Invite Frank. Invite anyone connected to this mess. Evelyn was silent for a moment, then a slow, cold smile cut across her face. You're smarter than you let people think, George. I'm just doing what Lauren would do, I replied. Evelyn nodded. She'll assume you've forgiven everything, that you're slipping back into normal. This is where we pull her into the light. I asked. You think she'll come? Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Greedy people never skip a chance to perform generosity. That night before bed, I looked over every piece of evidence again. Everything Mary had done, everything I had gathered, everything Lauren had written in her letter. I ran my thumb across Lauren's words. Keep your honor, not your money. And I understood something. This fight wasn't about destroying Mary. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my own life. Not the man with memory issues, not the weakened old father, not the victim, but a man still in command of himself. At the end of June, I picked up my phone and drafted a message to Michael. I'd like to host a small fundraiser dinner for the veterans. I hope you and Mary can attend. It will be a warm evening. Then I added the line I knew Mary would read and believe I want the family to be close again. I hit send. Just as I predicted, 1 minute later, Michael, we'll be there. Mary is excited. You're doing something wonderful, Dad. I exhaled slowly. A smile formed, a smile I hadn't felt in a long time. A cold, steady, purposeful smile. Because that veterans dinner would be more than a fundraiser. It would be the light that exposes every shadow. And Mary, blinded by her own hunger, would walk straight into the trap. A trap made of kindness. Her favorite kind. July 2024. Portland, Oregon. Some truths don't come from adults. Not from lawyers, investigators, or the people who believe they're too smart to be fooled. Sometimes the biggest truths come from someone just old enough to understand but too young to have learned how to lie. For me, that truth came on a hot July evening. From Seattle through the trembling voice of my 18-year-old granddaughter Emma. Portland was unusually warm that night. No wind, no movement in the air. The house felt like it was holding its breath as if it knew something was about to happen. I was sorting documents with Evelyn when my phone rang. Emma, Seattle. Evelyn paused. Her eyes sharpened instantly. I'll take this, I said. I answered. Grandpa? Emma's voice was small, trembling. I braced myself with one hand on the table. I'm here, Emma. Talk to me. I can only talk for a minute. Mom, she said I shouldn't call you. My heart tightened like someone had reached inside and squeezed. What happened? Emma inhaled sharply and spoke fast the way a child speaks when they're afraid someone might snatch the phone away. I saw an account with your name on it. At a bank in Austin. The last numbers were 4590. The room fell silent. The lamp cast shadows across the papers on the table, and suddenly the printed letters looked blurred like they were trying to warn me. 4590. The numbers stabbed straight through my mind like a needle. Evelyn shot to her feet. Her eyes widened. I kept my voice steady. Emma, how do you know this? I heard Mom talking to Mary. Emma whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't understand everything, but I heard one part clearly. The 4590 account is still active. Make sure he doesn't suspect anything. I looked at Evelyn. Her jaw tightened. Emma continued. They said you were forgetful, that your memory was getting worse. But I know you're not like that. You remembered my birthday down to the hour. I closed my eyes. The cruelty wasn't just aimed at me anymore. Mary was reshaping how my own granddaughter saw me. Emma. You're very brave, I said softly. But you must keep this secret. Don't tell your mom. Don't tell Mary. Don't tell Michael. Only contact me through your private email. Understand, I know. I'll be careful. Her breath hitched. Grandpa, I'm scared. I spoke gently. Don't be. I'm handling it. I hung up before she started crying. Evelyn stared at me, her voice low. 4590. George. That's huge. I swallowed. Why, Evelyn turned her laptop toward me and began typing rapidly. She accessed an internal investigation portal, one she still had connections to from her years in practice. After a few seconds, there she whispered. The account appeared on screen. Account holder, George Whitman. Ending digits 4590. Branch Austin. Internal Processing Unit. Evelyn zoomed in on the authorization section, and in that moment I felt something inside me crack straight down the middle. Authorized signature Michael Whitman. But the signature wasn't his, not the real one. It looked rushed, uneven, like someone had guided his hand. I whispered, Michael. Signed. This. Evelyn placed a hand on my shoulder. Hold on. She scrolled to the next field, submission method form submitted via Solar Core internal HR portal. Submitted by Mary Whitman. I heard it, the sound of Evelyn exhaling slow and sharp. She used the company's internal system, she said. She funneled Michael into signing a form he didn't understand. I collapsed back into my chair. When I asked, Evelyn checked the timeline. June 18th, 2023. Right after their argument about Michael's annual bonus. My breath caught. I remembered that month. Michael had come to visit briefly. He looked exhausted, overwhelmed. He told me Dad Mary's helping me with some HR paperwork. Just routine stuff. But none of us knew that this was the exact moment Mary tricked him into signing the 4590 account into existence, under the guise of a family profile update form. Evelyn sank into a chair. I'll be blunt, she said. This is the strongest piece of evidence we've seen. Because she controlled my money, I asked. Evelyn shook her head. No. Because this proves Michael was deceived. Legally deceived. I stared at her. What does that mean? Her voice cut through the air like a thin blade. It means Mary didn't just exploit you, George. She used your son as a tool for fraud. My blood went cold. Is that a crime? Evelyn nodded. Not one crime. 5. She listed them. 1. Elder financial exploitation. 2. Fraudulent use of corporate systems. 3. Coerced signature. Misrepresentation. 4. Unauthorized access to financial accounts. 5. Attempted establishment of medical POA by deception. Then she looked at me. George, she was trying to take your life away from you. A few more steps, and she would have succeeded. I didn't speak. I stared at the forged signature of my son, a son who had no idea what he had signed, a son who thought he was doing routine HR paperwork. Emma's voice echoed in my mind. They said you were forgetful, but I know you're not. And suddenly everything fell into place. Mary wasn't just planting doubt in neighbors' banks and government offices. She was planting it inside my own family. If I protested, she could simply say, he's confused. He's misremembering. It happens at his age. It was a perfect tactic. Just believable enough for outsiders. Just poisonous enough to make Michael question me. But Emma saw the truth adults missed, just like Lauren always did. That night, after confirming the 4590 account, Evelyn elevated our strategy. We're shifting from documentation to a full-scale legal investigation, she said. 2 fronts. Yes. Front 1, pursue Mary for elder financial exploitation. Front 2, protect Michael by proving he was coerced. I whispered Michael. I had been angry with him. Angry for letting Mary control him. Angry for believing her over me. But now I understood Michael wasn't the architect of any of this. He was another victim, and I was the prize. I closed my eyes. "I don't want him hurt," I said quietly. Evelyn nodded firmly. "And that's exactly why we need the truth. Michael is in more danger than he realizes." I opened my eyes. "Do it." 3 days later, Evelyn received the full technical file from the Austin Branch System Logs IP address records, login history document, upload sources, metadata from the driver's license scan, signature analysis, internal timestamps. And when she clicked the final file, we both froze. The password hint for the account was Emma's birthday. Emma's own birthday used as bait. Used so I wouldn't question the account. Used so I'd think it was grandfather-granddaughter related. Evelyn spoke slowly. She used Emma's birthday to disarm you. She made the account feel sentimental. Something hot and humiliating tightened in my chest. Mary understood me. Too well. She weaponized the one thing I loved most, the bond between me and my granddaughter. That was the moment the fire inside me changed shape. It wasn't anger anymore. It was resolve. I opened my old notebook, the one Lauren had once called your second brain. I wrote July 2024. Account 459 knew as the key. Michael was deceived. Mary used Emma's birthday. This isn't suspicion. This is a crime. I set the pen down, stared out the window. Portland was drenched in rain. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement like long, tired memories, the kind people carry when they've trusted the wrong person. Evelyn stood beside me. "George," she said quietly, "from this moment on, we're not defending anymore." I turned to her. "What are we doing?" Her voice sharpened. "We're attacking. How I'll file for a formal state-level investigation, and 4590 will be the spearhead." I stood slowly. My knee stiffened with age, but my voice did not. "Do it." Evelyn submitted the files to the Elder Financial Abuse Office, the Oregon State Financial Regulatory Bureau, and the Multnomah County Elder Protection Division. We both knew there was no turning back now, because the 4590 account with the coerced signature, the corporate metadata, and Emma's birthday as the bait was the strongest weapon we had. Not because of the money, but because it proved something far darker. Mary didn't just want wealth. She wanted control, dominion, power over every aspect of my life, even the parts of me that were sacred. But she made one mistake. She didn't count on Emma. She didn't count on a child's honesty sharp enough to cut through any deception. I stepped out onto the porch and looked into the dark yard ahead. And I whispered, perhaps to Lauren, perhaps to the fire still burning in me, I found the key. The door to the truth had opened, and my fire had never burned brighter. August 2024, Portland, Oregon. There are evenings that look warm from the outside, golden lights, gentle laughter, the illusion of family and goodwill. But beneath all that softness, sometimes there's a trap waiting for the person arrogant enough to step right into it. For me, the Veterans Fundraiser dinner wasn't a celebration. It was bait, a cold, deliberate trap built from kindness, memory, and the one thing Mary never questioned: my age. She believed I was old, soft, slow, easy to manipulate. She thought this dinner was her stage, a place to parade around as the flawless, generous, financially savvy wife in front of Portland's firefighter and veteran community. She didn't know that the spotlight she craved was about to burn straight through her mask. And I would stand there, not angry, not shouting, just watching as she walked into the light on her own. That evening, the Portland Firehouse Hall was lined with old photographs, winter night shifts, burning rooftops, collapsing in orange and black, the faces of men who had saved strangers and those we had lost. It was a room of memories, and tonight it would become a room of truth. Guests arrived early. Older veterans with silver hair, retired firefighters with old injuries and old stories, Frank Davis, who flew in from Austin, Pastor Lee, and finally Michael and Mary. Mary walked in wearing a white dress far too polished for a modest fundraiser. She hugged people she barely knew, smiled with soft eyes she did not feel, and talked as if she were the host. I watched her from across the room. Her voice was honey, but every word was a blade. If anyone here ever needs financial support, Solar Core is always happy to help, she cooed, tilting her head just so. I knew that face, that smile, that calculated sweetness. Mary wasn't just pretending. She was performing. And Michael stood beside her, proud, believing she was simply good with money, believing she cared. He had no idea he was living with a woman whose entire identity was a stage costume. Tonight that costume would fall apart. At 7 p.m. I stepped onto the stage. My voice was steady, low, slow, the voice of a man who had seen too many flames in his lifetime. Thank you all for being here. We gather not only to support each other, but to remember what we survived, who we lost, and what we stood for. I nodded to Thomas, my old firefighting partner. Roll the video. The lights dimmed. The screen came alive. Footage of decades past appeared, men leaping from engines, families crying with relief, helmets streaked with soot, the kind of memories that smelled like smoke even through a screen. The room fell silent. Then, halfway through the tribute, the screen flickered, and a different video appeared. A video no one else knew existed, except me. On the screen, Mary Whitman, inside my home, in my office, opening Lauren's file cabinet, pulling out folders, taking pictures with her phone, digging through drawers, sliding documents into her bag, looking over her shoulder like a thief. The night vision camera cast her in a pale, ghost-like glow, a look that stripped her of every ounce of charm she'd worn into the room. A collective gasp moved through the hall. Mary shot to her feet like she'd been electrocuted. That isn't me!" she screamed, but her voice trembled too fast, too shrill. I watched from the stage. I didn't blink. Mary staggered toward the projector table, grabbing at the HDMI cable. "Turn it off! This is a mistake. It's the wrong video." Her panic did not save her. It exposed her. Michael stood up slowly, his face colorless. "Mary, what were you doing in Dad's house?" I was looking for insurance paperwork," she spit out, her voice cracking. No one believed her. A retired firefighter whispered, "That's burglary." Another muttered, "She was stealing something." Mary's eyes filled with fake tears, but tears don't save a liar. And the clip continued, frame by frame, action by action, crime by crime. When it ended, the lights rose. No applause, no chatter, just a suffocating silence, the kind I'd heard after a house fire is finally out and everyone is counting what's left. I stepped back to the microphone. "Thank you. Now, I'd like to share this year's donation figures." Mary stood next to Michael, shaking, clutching his arm. He didn't hold her back. I read from the paper in my hand. This year, Solar Core contributed $48,000, George Whitman Holdings. I paused. That account was not opened by me. Michael turned sharply toward Mary. "Did you know about this?" Mary's lips trembled. It was a donation. For your father." Her voice collapsed under its own lie. Frank Davis stepped forward carrying a thick folder. He projected a document onto the screen, the account registration form. My information, my address, my name, and Mary's signature. The internal system recorded her as the submitter. Frank said, voice flat and firm. Mary shrieked, "Frank, you're lying." Frank didn't even look at her. "You used the HR portal to trick Michael into co-signing." I checked the metadata myself. The hall erupted, not in noise, but in stunned, horrified quiet. Michael stumbled backward, staring at Mary like she was a stranger. "Mary, did you do all of this?" She lunged toward him. "Michael, I did it for us. For our future. You have to believe me." But Michael pulled his hand away as if her touch were fire. And then an unexpected voice rose. Old Mr. Reed, the 72-year-old Vietnam vet in the front row, lifted his phone. He said, "I posted this video to TikTok. It's at 8,000 views after 10 minutes. Mary spun around wild-eyed. "Delete it! Delete it now!" He shook his head. No. Behind him, a group of younger veterans spoke up. "Your burglary video is going viral. All of Portland is watching." Mary staggered back like the room was tilting. She whimpered. Why? Why are you all doing this to me?" I stepped forward. My voice was level, cold, steady. "Mary, this isn't something we're doing to you. This is something you did to yourself." Her face crumpled not from guilt but from exposure, from the terror of being seen, from the realization that her mask, the one she'd crafted so carefully, had melted off her face under the heat of truth. Michael walked out of the hall, didn't look at her, didn't speak. Mary reached out, but her fingers only touched empty air. She looked up at the screen, at the frozen image of herself rummaging through my drawers, and something in her finally broke. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing violently, not the sob of a repentant woman, but the sob of someone whose lies had been dragged screaming into daylight. I watched from the back of the hall, not satisfied, not triumphant, just calm. Because Lauren was right. Honor doesn't need noise. It needs light. And tonight, the light finally found its mark. September-October 2024, Portland, Oregon. Some truths don't burst into daylight with an explosion. They seep, a little at a time, quiet, persistent, until the whole dam breaks. For me, the dam broke on the morning of September 2nd, 2024, when I received a text from an old firefighter. "George, check the news. They printed your story." I opened my phone. On the front page of the Portland Tribune was a still frame from Mr. Reed's viral TikTok video. The headline blazed in red: "Daughter-in-law scams retired firefighter, hidden accounts, forged signatures, and elder abuse." I stared at those words. Not proud, not relieved, not wounded. Just still. Because for the first time in months, the outside world finally saw what I had seen all along. The report was 3 full pages long. It included the video of Mary rummaging through my drawers, the secret $45.90 account, the memory issues. Note the $48,000 solar core transfer, the signature analysis testimony from the veteran community, quotes from Frank Davis. Footage of Mary ripping out the HDMI cable. Halfway through the article, one sentence made me stop breathing. Whitman once saved 12 people from a burning apartment complex. Now he needs protection from his own family. I set the paper down and let my hand rest on the page. They were right, not about me, but about the word family. Mine had collapsed and the debris was beginning to crush Michael. Solar Core reacted fast, too fast, as if they'd been suspicious of Mary for months and were just waiting for the fire to hit daylight. The very next morning, the interim CEO released a company-wide email. Effective immediately. Mary Whitman is suspended pending investigation for misuse of corporate funds and unauthorized access to internal systems. Evelyn emailed me. "This is only the beginning. She's going to lose everything." I didn't reply. I just stared out the window. The Portland wind rattling the branches like someone shivering when the truth finally touches their skin. For weeks after the scandal exploded, letters and emails poured in. Veterans thanking me for speaking up. Neighbors apologizing for believing Mary's little stories. People in Austin admitting Mary often bragged about managing the Whitman family finances. And even survivors from the 1994 fire I saved wrote to me. But one letter made me pause longer than the rest. "George, when you saved me from that fire in '94, you said, 'I'm here.' Now it's our turn to say it to you. Frank." I read that letter 3 times. No tears. Not the kind you shed from sorrow. Only the kind you shed from endurance. But the one who suffered most was not me, not Mary. It was Michael. He vanished for nearly a month. No calls, no texts, no emails. Evelyn said, "Let him come to you. That's the only way he'll return whole." And on October 11th, as Portland sank into autumn rain, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it. Michael stood there, thinner, eyes sunken, beard unshaven. A man who had spent weeks staring into the empty space where his marriage used to be. He looked at me, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then suddenly he collapsed on my porch. "Dad," his voice cracked. "I can't believe she did this. I can't believe I was so stupid I didn't touch him. Didn't pull him up. Didn't blame him." I waited. She told me, "You forgot things. That you were confused. That you didn't know what you were talking about." He bowed his head into his hands. The rain soaked his hair, his jacket, but he didn't move. "Get up," I said softly. He lifted his face. There was a kind of pain in his eyes that no fire had ever created in my life. I led him inside, sat him in the old armchair, opened the drawer, took out Lauren's letter, the only thing left untouched by all this destruction. I placed it in Michael's hands, read. He wiped his face and unfolded it. I watched his expression shift as Lauren's words cut straight into him. "If someone ever tries to touch what belongs to you, keep your honor, not your money." Michael covered his mouth. His shoulders trembled. "Mom, she knew this could happen." "No," I said, "not this day. But she knew greed can destroy families." He squeezed the letter until it crumpled. "Dad, I didn't protect you. I believed a stranger over my own father." "You were deceived," I said evenly. "That is not the same as betrayal." His breath broke. And then he admitted something that pierced me deeper than any of Mary's schemes. "Mary, she stopped me from visiting you." I sat up straighter. "How?" "She told me not to stress you out. Said you were forgetting things, mixing up dates, that I'd upset you if I came." My jaw tightened. "What else?" Michael swallowed. "She changed the passcode on my phone." I turned toward him sharply. "For what reason?" "She said it was for security. But really, it was so I couldn't call you." Evelyn, who had stepped into the doorway, whispered, "George, this isn't control anymore. This is isolation." Michael nodded weakly. "I tried calling you in June. Dad, Mary told me you didn't want to talk. That you were stressed about aging." I closed my eyes. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was heavy as stone pressing down on my heart. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," Michael whispered. He tried to fall to his knees again, but this time I pulled him up. "Michael," I said, "this is not your fault. The fault lies with the person who convinced you your father was weak." He cried again, but these tears were different. Not despair, awakening. I placed Lauren's letter in his hand. "You see now, your mother warned us. Your job now isn't repentance, it's to stand with me." He nodded. "I will. I'll cooperate. I'll tell everything." "I swear." "No need to swear," I said. "Just tell the truth." That night, Evelyn sat with us as we organized the next phase of the fight. She spread the documents across the table, the 4590 account, HR metadata, the drawer rummaging video, the forged signatures, the unfinished medical POA, the DMV note, the $22,000 corporate misuse, the $48,000 transfer, Emma's testimony. Michael stared at the pile hollow-eyed. I lived with her, and I never saw it. Evelyn replied quietly, "The most skilled abusers make sure their victims never see." I exhaled slowly. "It's time to send the file." She nodded. Tomorrow I'll deliver it to the Elder Financial Abuse Office. She paused. George. There's no stopping this now. Later, as Michael left for his hotel, he paused at the doorway. Dad, I don't know what my life will look like after this, but I know one thing. I waited. I found my father again. He walked into the Portland rain, a lone figure blurred by water, but no longer controlled, no longer deceived, no longer blind. A man waking from a long nightmare. When the door closed, the house fell quiet. Evelyn said Michael may be awake now, but what she broke inside him, that may take years. I looked at Lauren's letter on the table and whispered, I know, but he came home. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I stood at the window watching Portland's streetlights shimmer on the wet pavement. Tomorrow the official case would be filed. Tomorrow the fight would turn into a war. No more doubts, no more hesitation, no more shadows. Tomorrow I would face everything head on. Not to defeat Mary, but to reclaim my family from the ashes she left behind. There are mornings that don't feel cold yet. The air still stings the lungs like needles. The morning of November 3rd, 2024 was one of them. It was the day I officially became a victim in a state-level investigation, and Mary became the primary suspect in a charge far darker than betrayal, elder financial abuse. Evelyn and Detective Harris arrived at my house at 9 a.m. Harris wore a black coat badge low on his chest, eyes sharp, like a blade that had been honed for years. Evelyn set a thick folder on the dining table, the same place where Lauren used to sit and steep tea. George, she said quietly, prepare yourself. We found more than we expected. My hand tightened on the table edge. More. How Harris sat across from me, pulling out a manila envelope. We located an affidavit Mary filed in April of last year. In it, he paused as though searching for the gentlest way to deliver a wound. She declared herself your legal caregiver. My spine went cold. Caregiver? My voice cracked. I never signed anything. Evelyn nodded. The signature is forged. We compared it with your DMV file, your insurance forms, your property records. It doesn't match. Harris laid the affidavit on the table. I stared at it the way a man stares at an object pulled from a dark world he never meant to enter. In the box labeled Signature of Client was a crooked imitation of my name, trying to mimic age, but missing its weight, missing its soul. And Harris continued, she used this affidavit to email your bank, the Medicare office, and even the IRS. My head lifted sharply. The IRS. Evelyn let out a long, heavy breath. George. The IRS opened a separate file. They confirmed Mary filed a tax return under your name in 2023. I went still. Mary hadn't just crossed a moral line. She had stepped into federal crime. Harris added, we don't yet know her plan. Possibly filing for refunds in your name, routing money into the 4590 account, or preparing to claim you cognitively impaired for financial control. I stared into nothing. The room blurred. Only the truth remained rising like sludge from the bottom of a well. The investigation begins. On November 14th, a formal notice arrived from the Elder Financial Abuse Office. Notice of investigation, Case 24, EFA 1812. My name was on the first line, Mary's on the second. Evelyn said, from this moment forward, every word, every email, every step you take is potential evidence. I nodded slowly. What about Michael? I asked. He's been called as a witness. Frank Davis, too. Michael. My son. Once the pride of my life. Now a man forced to testify against his own wife. I knew how deeply that would cut him. Mary fights back and drowns in her own lies. Not everyone exposed to daylight collapses quietly. Some, even as they sink, still claw for anyone near them to drag down too. Mary was that kind. On November 17th, Pastor Lee arrived with a printed email. George, he said gently, you need to see this. The email was addressed to the church from Mary Whitman, subject urgent. George needs help. He's severely depressed and paranoid. He thinks I'm stealing from him. I'm worried about him. Please talk to him. He's showing early signs of dementia. I read it without anger, without humiliation. Just sorrow. Not sorrow for myself, but for Michael. Pastor Lee placed a hand on my shoulder. George, people with depression don't do what you've been doing. They don't gather evidence. They don't confront banks. They don't seek counsel. They don't help others. I simply said Mary is drowning, Pastor. And drowning people try to pull others down with them. He nodded, face carved with grief. The mediation, a room of bleach and lies. The mediation was scheduled for late November. Not a courtroom, no judge's gavel, just a small sterile room in Salem, white walls, fluorescent lights, and a faint chemical scent that clung to the skin like guilt. The mediator sat in the center. Evelyn to my left, Detective Harris behind us. Mary entered last, wearing a beige office dress, makeup carefully applied to look tired and fragile. She pressed a hand to her forehead, the universal gesture of I'm overwhelmed. I'm misunderstood. Michael walked in behind her. He didn't look at her. Not once. He looked only at me. The mediator said, "We're here to explore settlement before this proceeds to a full hearing." Mary inhaled sharply. Tears instantly welled up. "George, I only ever wanted what was best for you. You don't need money, you need honor. If you withdraw the complaint, I'll return everything." I stared at her, expressionless. Honor, I said, does not have a price. It hit her like a slap. She sank back in her chair, trembling. Evelyn placed a stack of documents on the table. Here is the evidence. The 4590 account, the forged affidavit, the falsified signature, the video of her in the house, the incomplete medical POA, the defamatory email to the church, the $48,000 transfer, IRS confirmation of fraudulent filings, Emma's testimony, Frank's witness statement, Solar Core internal data. Mary's voice cracked. It's not all me." The mediator cut her off. "Ms. Whitman, this is not a trial. This is simply to determine whether Mr. Whitman is willing to settle." Without hesitation, I replied, "No." Mary bolted upright. "You're destroying this family." I looked at the empty chair beside her, the place Michael once pulled out for her during dinner. Now it sat cold, vacant, like their marriage. "Mary, I said this family broke the day you opened the 4590 account." She fell silent. The mediator scribbled notes and stood. "Mediation has failed. The case will proceed to the Elder Financial Abuse Court. Trial date February 2025. That was the sentence Mary feared most. She collapsed into her chair, hands covering her face. Michael turned away as if he couldn't bear to witness what remained of the woman he once trusted. When the room emptied, only Evelyn and I remained. She said, "Once a court date is set, there's no going back, no settlements, no silence." I looked at the paper marked confirmed court date, February 2025, and whispered, as if speaking to Lauren, I kept my promise. Down the hallway, Mary sobbed into her phone, begging someone, anyone, to save her. But her cries no longer carried weight, no longer carried power, no longer carried the ability to destroy me. Detective Harris closed the file. From this point forward, he said, everything happens in the light. She has nowhere left to hide. I nodded. No smile, no victory, just quiet resolve. Then I walked out of the mediation building into the first sting of winter wind, sharp as a knife. But I didn't fear it, didn't flinch, because for the first time in years, my honor wasn't being used. It was being defended. February 2025. Salem, Oregon. The courthouse in Salem was so cold that morning my breath turned into white smoke right in front of my face. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of color the world carries right before a storm breaks. People say days like this are omens, days when things end, and things begin. I walked up the stone steps of the Elder Financial Abuse Court, each step landing heavy like I was stepping on the bones of my own past. Months of being deceived. Months of being doubted, dismissed, treated like a confused old man, all of it gathered in the weight of my boots. Evelyn walked beside me, silent, steady. Michael followed just behind, gripping his mother's letter, as if it were the only solid thing left in his life. His face was thin, tired, but clear. And Mary standing at the end of the hallway, clutching her file folder as if it were the last rope keeping her above water. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. Courtroom 3, where truth doesn't shake. Judge Morales presided. Older, silver-haired eyes sharp as a forged blade. A man who had handled dozens of elder exploitation cases. Cases where family members twisted love into leverage and took the last breath of dignity from the elderly. Today, he looked at Mary like he'd already seen everything she was made of. "Court is now in session," he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was heavy. Detective Harris stepped forward. Evelyn stood beside me. Mary sat next to her attorney, a man trying to look calm but stealing glances at her like he was calculating the damage. Michael took a seat behind me, not beside her. That distance between them was larger than their whole marriage. Frank takes the stand. Frank Davis was called first. He stood tall, hand on the witness rail. "I swear to tell the truth." Judge Morales nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Davis." Frank looked at me first, then at Mary. "Mr. Whitman saved my life. If he hadn't pulled me out of the fire on March 30th, 1994, I wouldn't be here. He's the reason I've tried all my life to do honest work." The room went still. He continued, "Solar Corps never intended any donation to George Whitman Holdings. The $48,000 transfer was unauthorized and approved by Mary Whitman." Mary's attorney shot up. "Objection. My client did not." Judge Morales raised a hand. "Overruled. Continue, Mr. Davis." Frank handed over a printed metadata sheet. "This proves Mary used Solar Corps' internal HR systems to trick Michael Whitman into signing an account opening form. Michael didn't know what he was signing." Michael's head sank. His hands tightened together. Frank finished softly, "Mr. Whitman never asked for money. He wanted nothing but fairness. I'm here to repay the debt I owe him." I gripped the chair to keep my hands from shaking. Mary's shoulders hunched, a sheen of sweat forming on her forehead. Emma enters. When Emma walked into the courtroom, Mary flinched as if she'd seen a ghost. My granddaughter, just 18. Small, pale, but with a strength in her eyes that reminded me of Lauren. She placed her hand on the rail. "My name is Emma Whitman. I have recordings of my mother talking with Mary." The courtroom leaned forward. Judge Morales nodded. "Go ahead, Miss Whitman." Emma unlocked her phone, fingers trembling. Mary's attorney leapt up. "Objection. Oregon is a two-party consent state," for Morales didn't even blink. "Not in elder financial abuse investigations involving minors." Objection denied. The attorney's jaw snapped shut. Emma pressed play. Mary's voice filled the courtroom, cold, cutting, venomous. "He won't live much longer anyway. That money needs to be with someone who knows how to use it, not some senile old man." I didn't blink, didn't flinch. I'd known this truth for months. But Michael, he broke. He covered his face with both hands, shoulders shaking as a sound escaped him. A sound of something that had been strangled for too long. Emma swallowed hard. "My grandfather is not senile. I know that. They wanted everyone to believe it so they could control him." Mary shrank into her seat, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. A lifeline already torn. Mary tries to perform. When her turn came, Mary stood like a bad actress in a bad play. She lowered her head, voice trembling. "Mr. Whitman misunderstood me. I only wanted to help. He was lonely. He needed care. I wasn't trying to exploit anyone." Judge Morales raised an eyebrow. "You opened an account in his name." I was trying to protect him. You transferred $48,000 into an account you controlled. That was family savings. You forged his signature. I only did that because Michael. You filed an affidavit claiming to be his legal caregiver. I just wanted... You emailed the church accusing him of dementia. Mary froze. No one lies long under a judge who's seen everything. Do you have anything else to say? Morales asked. Mary turned to Michael. Her last card, her voice cracked. Please, please defend me. But Michael turned away. He couldn't even look at her. A lifetime of manipulation collapsed in that single moment. The verdict, judge. Morales closed the folder, tapped his pen against the desk. Mrs. Whitman, he said, standing, I have reviewed all the evidence, and I have only one thing to say. He leaned forward. Mr. Whitman protected lives his entire career. You, on the other hand, sold his dignity for a handful of checks. The courtroom held its breath. Morales lifted the order. This court finds Mary Whitman guilty of elder financial exploitation level 2. She is ordered to repay the full $48,000 serve. 2 years of supervised probation. Be barred from financial employment for 5 years. Undergo 36 months of financial integrity. Monitoring. This hearing is adjourned. Bang! The gavel fell. Mary collapsed, sliding back into her chair, hands clawing the edge of the table like a drowning woman finally seeing the ocean floor. Her attorney didn't comfort her. He didn't even look at her. Because he knew this case had been lost the moment truth hit the light. Outside the courtroom, people filed out silently. Michael stood near the exit, his back to Mary. He looked at me, eyes raw, broken, and relieved. Dad. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I placed a hand on his shoulder. No anger, no judgment. There are apologies that can only be answered in silence. Evelyn gathered her files. We did it, George. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. I stared at the cold tile floor, not triumphant, not vengeful, just lighter, as if a weight that had sat on my chest for a lifetime finally slipped away. I walked past Mary. She looked up, eyes red, pleading, waiting for me to meet her gaze. I didn't. Not out of hatred, not out of cruelty, but because she was no longer part of my story. I pushed open the courthouse door and stepped into the biting Salem wind. The sky was heavy, silent, no sun, no birds, just the quiet of a winter morning when justice is served, not by shouting, not by revenge, but by the stillness of a man who knows he was right all along. There are days with no sirens, no red lights slicing through the night, no towers of smoke climbing into the sky, and yet deep inside a man, a fire still burns. May 2025 was that kind of month. When I held the $48,000 restitution check, I didn't feel joy. Money can't rebuild a past. It can't return sleepless nights. It can't erase the scar a betrayal leaves on a man's heart. But it can do one thing. It can open the last chapter of the journey Lauren began years ago. I drove to Firehouse Station 19, my old station. The place where I hung my first turnout coat. Where I held brothers who never made it back. Where Lauren and I stood beneath a red flag on our wedding day. The station had been shut down since 2017, paint peeling, rust on the bay doors, moss spreading across the lot. But when I stepped inside, I could almost hear echoes. Boots pounding concrete, radios crackling, sirens distant and rising, and Lauren laughing as she handed me the lunch she packed. I stood in the center of the empty bay. This place had once been hot as a furnace. Now it was cold as a morgue. Evelyn turned to me. George, this is no longer a firehouse, not the old kind. From today on, it's your past and also someone else's future. I didn't answer. I just breathed, deep. Then I signed the papers. Station 19 belonged to me. In June, I began rebuilding. Not to turn it into a retirement home the way Mary once mocked. Not to make it a private house, but to turn it into the Whitman Firehouse Foundation, a vocational and recovery center for veterans and young people fighting their way back from trauma. We rebuilt everything. New floors, fresh paint, restored fire pump systems for training, a workshop for repairing firefighting equipment, a job support fund for veterans, a therapy room for PTSD recovery. I worked dawn to dusk, hands blistered, back aching. But I didn't feel old. I felt alive. Every time I swung a hammer into rotted wood, I thought, Lauren, I'm building something you'd be proud of. Evelyn stopped by with coffee. The court knows what you're doing, she said. They respect it. I nodded, but I wasn't doing it for the court. I was doing it for honor. The honor I nearly lost by staying silent too long. Michael returns. On July 19th, Michael's car pulled into the lot. I was mounting the frame for the new sign shirt, soaked hands covered in sawdust. Emma jumped out first. Grandpa. She wrapped her arms around me tight like she feared I might disappear. Michael stayed back, a few steps away, not daring to come closer. I placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, then looked at him. Come here. He approached. No excuses, no rehearsed speeches, no defenses. He just stood beside me like a boy next to his father on the first day of school. I kept working on the sign. Michael reached up silently to steady the board for me. 2 men, 1 ladder, 1 summer sun, and years of distance shrinking inch by inch. After a long while, he said quietly, I lost my job, Dad. I didn't speak. I waited. Solar Corps didn't want my name tied to the scandal. They pressured me to resign. He stared at the unfinished sign, the Whitman Firehouse Foundation. Then he said something that hit me harder than any flame ever had. I lost my company. But I found my father. I put a strong hand on his shoulder. Honor doesn't retire, son. Money can go. Honor stays. Michael lowered his head. His shoulders shook, not from grief, but from something else, the feeling of a hollow space inside him finally being filled again. A gift from the old guard. In August, a group of older firefighters came by, led by Mr. Reed, 72 years old. They carried a small wooden box, worn and scratched. We want you to have this, Reed said. I opened it. Inside lay a charred scrap of fabric, a piece of my turnout coat from the 1994 fire. The fire where I saved Frank. The fire that nearly swallowed me whole. The cloth was blackened, edges burned stiff, but in my hands it felt soft as memory. Reed said, some people think honor is something you show off. But for us, honor is what you live by. He put a firm hand on my shoulder. You didn't just hold on to your honor, George. You kept ours alive, too. I could not speak. That scrap of fabric was heavier than any medal I had ever received because it came from the men who knew exactly who I had been and who I still was. By late August 2025, everything was ready. The pump room hummed, the workshop gleamed, the veterans' job program was active. The therapy room was filled with sunlight. The old firehouse glowed again. On the day we hung the sign, Portland was strangely clear. No rain, no wind, just a soft sheet of sunlight. Evelyn stood on my left, Michael and Emma on my right. Harris came too, no longer as an investigator but as a friend. I lifted the new sign, metal cold, heavy, solid. I mounted it slowly, firmly, 1 bolt at a time. When I stepped back, everyone else stepped back with me. The sign shone like a living flame. The Whitman Firehouse Foundation. Honor never retires. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Michael whispered, Dad, you didn't just rebuild a firehouse. You lit a new fire. I looked at the sign, at the old station, at the sunlight glinting off the fresh paint, and I thought, no, this wasn't a new fire. This was Lauren's fire, the one she trusted me to carry, and I was finally, truly keeping it alive. November 12th, 2025, Portland, Oregon. I stood in the middle of the workshop, a place that once echoed with the clatter of hose carts more than 30 years ago. Now the same walls held the laughter of young veterans learning how to rebuild a fire pump under my hands, the same way I rebuilt my own life. On the table lay an M13 fire pump taken apart completely like a heart that had failed once waiting to be reassembled. Tommy, 24. Discharged with PTSD. Reese, 28. Lost his best friend to an explosion. Carlos, 30. Drifting between odd jobs after leaving the service. All of them stood around me, gloves on, waiting for direction. This, I said, voice low and steady, is a high-pressure waterline. Never underestimate it. Pressure can crack steel in 1 second. Tommy smirked. Like life, huh, sir? I smiled. Exactly. Life has pressure too, and we're not always ready for it. But if you know how to put the pieces back together, anything can run again. They chuckled, not the loud laughter of the young, but the soft laugh of people who've walked through darkness and made it out the other side. When I looked at them, I saw myself the invisible cracks, the quiet hurts, the losses no one else ever sees. And I knew my job wasn't just to teach them skills, it was to teach them endurance, the same endurance Lauren once taught me. While they worked, I stepped back. The workshop stretched before me. The training bay, the polished tool racks, Lauren's old fire diagram laminated on the wall. A photo of the 1988 crew. My old helmet hanging by the window. And suddenly a voice rose inside me, my own voice, but older, deeper, worn. I've put out thousands of fires, but some fires don't die with water. Some burn quietly inside the heart, and they only go out when the truth is lit. I said it aloud without meaning to. Tommy glanced over. Sir, you say something. I shook my head, smiling, just remembering. An old flame. Right then, Emma stepped inside the workshop, now 19, ponytail tied back, camera in hand. Grandpa, can I film you? I nodded. Of course. She stepped closer, adjusting the focus. Grandpa, say that last thing again. I need it for my college essay. I raised an eyebrow. What's the essay about? She grinned, eyes glistening. About the person who taught me that honor. Burns brighter than any fire. I inhaled slowly. Sweetheart, this story isn't easy to hear. She placed her hand on mine. I want the world to know, Grandpa. What you went through, what you rebuilt, what you saved even when you weren't wearing a turnout coat anymore. I looked into the camera, and in that lens I saw myself 1 year ago, thin, tired, trembling, manipulated, ignored, treated like an old man losing his mind. Now I saw myself as someone who survived a fire no one else could see. My name is George Whitman. I used to fight fires, but the biggest fire I ever faced was inside my own home. Emma laughed through tear-bright eyes. Grandpa, that's perfect. On the wall behind her hung a framed photo of Lauren, set where the morning sun hit strongest. She was smiling in the picture, the smile of someone who understood me, who always saw more than I said, and who somehow knew I would walk through a storm someday. I stepped toward the frame and touched it lightly. Lauren! My voice barely escaped. I kept my promise. Evelyn stood at a distance, watching but silent. She knew this moment was mine alone. I stayed there a long time, not grieving, not wounded, but filled with the calm that comes after a man has walked through the darkest part of his life and come out standing. During lunch, a group of older veterans entered. Reed, Alvarez, Frank, all of them. Frank pulled me into a tight hug. George, we brought you something. They opened a wooden box. Inside lay a metal plaque, for courage beyond duty, for honor beyond fear, for rebuilding what others tried to burn. The veterans of Portland Fire and Rescue. My hands trembled. Alvarez said, "You kept your own honor, but you also kept ours." I couldn't answer. I just nodded, a man with no words left, only gratitude. Later that afternoon, Portland's sky cleared in a way I hadn't seen in years. No rain, no fog, just a clean slice of autumn sun. I stepped outside and looked up at the firehouse sign, newly mounted, newly polished, gleaming over the rebuilt station. The Whitman Firehouse Foundation. Honor never retires. The autumn light struck it just right, making it glow like forged gold. I stood there, with no heaviness in my chest, no shadows behind me, no fear, only peace. The kind of peace you earn after losing, hurting, fighting, and rising again. Emma walked beside me. "Grandpa, this is your best moment." I smiled. "It's beautiful because it's not about me. It's about honor." She nodded. "And about the people you saved, even the ones who never knew it." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, honor never retires. If you're watching this, and you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told your age makes you weaker, listen to me. Your honor has never been weak. It's only been waiting for the right moment to burn bright again. If you've ever stood up for yourself, or rebuilt your life after someone tried to tear it down, share your story in the comments. We want to hear your voice. Click like if George's journey meant something to you. Click subscribe to hear more stories where dignity outshines betrayal, where courage beats fear, and where justice rises even in the quietest rooms. Honor never retires, and neither do you.